Well, good morning.
Good morning. Happy Sabbath.
Thank you. To you too, and it sure is great to see a lot of familiar faces. Some of those familiar faces I haven't seen for a long time. So it's a privilege to be here. And I want to direct our attention to, by the way, wasn't that a great devotional?
Amen.
I was really moved by that. Thank you for sharing that. I want to begin with a scripture that I think you could probably all quote with me by heart. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. I want to take some time this morning to talk about that verse. And I want to say this before I get too much further here. Do you ever wonder why guest speakers pick the topics they do when they're coming to speak to you? Or how they arrive at that? And I want you to know that I haven't chosen the topics that I did today because I was thinking of you and thinking, what do I need to tell these people? I was thinking about, I was given 3 slots to speak, and I was thinking about what 3 things would I choose that I need to be thinking about. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today are really, if I were given just 3 slots to speak to myself, this is what I would talk about. And I hope and trust that there's something there for you too. How's that? So I've been thinking a lot about this scripture. I've been thinking about the importance. There's a lot of noise in our world. In fact, it would be good for us to go to Psalm 46:10, and I invite you to turn there in your Bibles. Psalm 46, what I'd really like to do is let's start at verse 1 so we sort of get the feel for this chapter, because I really think that it sure speaks to me for the things that are happening in our world right now. God is our refuge and strength,
Amen.
a very present help in trouble. Therefore will we not fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. Selah. There is a river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God, the holy place, the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her, she shall not be moved. God shall help her, and that right early. The heathen raged, the kingdoms were moved, he uttered his voice, the earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Come, behold the works of the Lord, what desolations he hath made in the earth. He maketh wars to cease unto the end of the earth. He breaketh the bow, he cutteth the spear in sunder. He burneth the chariot in the fire. And now we get to verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. I invite you to pause with me as we pray and ask God to be with us in this study this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for this opportunity we have to open your Word. And we're dependent upon you through the Holy Spirit to speak to our minds today, to touch our hearts, to help us to understand your Word as it applies to each one of us. And I pray earnestly that we would take from this study a clear understanding of what we need to do now. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. So I said that I thought that this verse was especially pertinent for us today. And the reason is because there's so much noise. There's so much chaos. And did you notice as we're reading these verses, it talks about a very chaotic, tumultuous time. And there's a contrast. To be still, another way to translate the Hebrew word there would be to cease or to stop, which implies that there's a lot of activity. And there certainly is a lot of activity, and there's a lot of turmoil in our world right now, right? I mean, it's amazing. This is an amazing time. We're just coming off of a huge historic event that I'm sure everyone was watching with interest, right? The papal visit to the United States, and I'm going to actually be sharing some thoughts on that this afternoon. So I'll refrain until then. There's a lot of upheaval in the economic world right now. Things are very tenuous and very fragile. Many people in the world, I think, have no idea how fragile it is and how close the world is to horrific, calamitous economic developments that we're just hanging by a thread. And, someone could rightly argue and say, well, it's been that way for a long time. And that's true. But that doesn't give me any comfort as far as making me think that, that makes it better. And in the midst of all of this, it seems to me most especially pertinent now, the instructions of God to be still. So, as I was saying, it's interesting to me that if you look at this chapter, stillness is in contrast to all of that movement and all that motion and the sea roaring and mountains being moved and this picture of incredible upheaval on the planet. And that's a contrast to being still. So clearly there's something there about stopping motion. But the question is, what is it that we should be stopping? What are we supposed to stop? And I want to refer today to an interesting experience. And I'll tell you, really, I hesitate to use the illustration because we have, in my opinion, a real expert horseman here. Larry, we've really grown to appreciate more and more over the years. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking I've appreciated getting better acquainted with Larry. But the reality is, my horses have probably spent more time with Larry than I have. So, and I know that they appreciate Larry too. But we had this experience that every father of a daughter has when his little girl says, "Dad, I want a horse." And maybe some of you dads were smarter than me because I sort of succumbed to that. But I decided that, we really needed to know what was going on with the horse thing. Because one thing I knew about horses is, they weigh about 1,000 pounds. And humans weigh a tenth of that. So we got a problem there. And I didn't want to look out the window and, see something horrible. So Laura and I talked about it, and we felt like, one of us needs to get involved with horses too, with, our daughter, so that we know what to scream out the window, at least, right? And I don't remember how it was decided upon that I was going to be that person. So we had a neighbor fairly close to us. This is when we were living in Malo, and we started Allison with some riding lessons, and I went too. And the initial plan was I would take riding lessons along with Allison, so I was going to be learning alongside her. But the instructor had a limited number of horses, and the horse that she put me on was not the most ideal horse to learn on. And so I found myself with a horse that I couldn't control, and I had no idea what I was doing, and it was a very unpleasant experience. Pretty much, all I could think about is I want to get off this horse. That was the whole ride, is I just need to get off of this animal. So I decided after the first day, I'll sit there on the log next to the round pen and I'll watch you guys work, and then I can learn by observation. Well, one day I was, expressing my thoughts about all this with a friend, and he said, you really need to go see Jerry over in Colville because he's a horse whisperer. Well, I was not so sure about that. What does that mean? But I was intrigued, and he said, really, you should check him out. So I called him up and I said, well, we're interested in riding lessons for my daughter. And he said, well, I don't do riding lessons. I said, oh. I said, well, I was recommended to you. And he said, no. He said, I teach you how to work with a horse. But he said, it's not riding lessons per se, but, you can learn to ride. But see, these aren't riding lessons. I said, okay, well. So I said, well, maybe I can come over sometime and spend some time with you, and we'll, see how it goes. So I didn't want to take Allison. I just thought I'd go myself. And so that takes me to the heart of this, where I'm telling you this story right now, because it was my first exposure, my first positive experience with horses, and we didn't ride the horse. We didn't get on the horse. But what happened was Jerry brought out of the barn this horse, and he was on a lead rope, and I didn't know what to watch for, but it seemed awfully subtle. But he was telling me what he was doing as he was giving signals to the horse, and the horse started moving. And the horse started walking around him, and then trotting around him, and then turned and changed direction. And at one point, Jerry's eyes lit up, and he said, "Look at him. He's paying attention to me now." And I was sort of lost. And he said, "Look at his ear." And sure enough, well, the first time I ever knew that a horse can move its ears independently. And the ear inside toward Jerry was cocked toward him distinctively. And I'll never forget the look on his face. He lit up and he was kind of like joyful, like he's paying attention to me now. And at that very moment, I couldn't help but think of a Bible verse, "Incline thine ear." And at the end of that experience, well, before we ended the day, Jerry handed me the rope. And he said, "Now you do it." And I was like, yeah, right. But he coached me along, and he told me what to do. And so that was the beginning of my more positive experience with horses. And I make no bones about it, I'm not a cowboy. I don't consider myself a real horseman. But I'm telling you this story because something amazing started to happen. I did get kind of hooked. I'll tell you that. So much so that one day I said to Jerry, "I have an idea. What if you got a green horse?" And I didn't do any further lessons with Jerry, by the way. I would sit on the bleachers there at his facility, and Allison would have the lessons, and I would watch with interest. And I said to him, "What if you got a green horse and you put us together? If your methods work as well as they appear to, then could you teach me and the horse at the same time? And like, could we take a horse that's green and a rider that's green and like go through the whole process?" And he looked at me and he said, "I've been waiting for an opportunity like this for years." And the problem is I didn't understand what he really meant by that. He had a little ornery streak. And I think what he was saying is he was waiting for somebody stupid enough to do this. But I said, "Well, Jerry," I said, "here's the deal." He'd been bragging about his horses. He said, "I don't get ugly horses. All my horses are good looking, and I get them cheap. You know, I got that one over there for $100, and that one for $100, now for..." So I said, "So here's the deal, Jerry. If you're going to do this, I want a good looking horse, and I don't want to pay more than $100. And he's, sort of hemmed and hawed. And I said, "No, wait a minute, Jerry, that's how you do it." So that's the deal. So, a couple of weeks went by, and he said, "Dave, we might have to come up on that $100 a little bit." And I said, "No, Jerry, that's the deal. $100, good-looking horse." So one day he called. He said, "I found the horse. Hardly been touched, and it's $100. And he said, "I think it's a pretty good-looking horse." Sent me the picture, and I thought, "Yeah, okay, that'll do." So we're going to go get him, right? Jerry's going to go get him and put him in a trailer, and I want to bring my camera. So I brought my video camera, I went with him, and I didn't get any footage because it was just so boring. It was like nothing happened. I mean, just Jerry got into this, he backed the trailer up, he got into the round pen, he kind of went like that with his hands, and the horse just walked into the trailer. So there was no movie, but that's when our little experience started. So for the next month, next 30 days, like 5-6 days a week, I would spend 2 to 3 hours a day with Jerry working with this horse. And the first day, that's all I'm going to tell you about because we could spend all morning talking about this. I don't want to do that if there's a point to this story. The first day, Jerry introduced me to sort of the basic concept of, well, what some people, I guess Monty Roberts calls it join up, or, it's when you kind of connect with the horse for the first time in the round pen. And so we got out there in the middle of the round pen, and he had a flag, gave me the flag, and you kind of make a sound with it, and the horse just starts running because he's a prey animal. He thinks everything is out to kill him, and so he just starts running. But he can only get so far away because you're in the round pen. And Jerry started to tell me, now you watch, there's a place in the round pen, there's a sweet spot where he'll kind of glance at you, like he's kind of giving you a chance. And he said, interestingly enough, usually it's always the same place in the round pen. And sometimes it's like 180 degrees on either side of the same place in the round pen. So you just watch for it. So the horse is running, and Jerry would say, "There it is." "Where? I missed it. Pretty soon I saw it, and it was so slight. It was just like a little glance. So then Jerry said, "Now the next time he approaches that place in the round pen, I want you to release the pressure. Just turn away." And so I did. An amazing thing happens. the horse just stops and looks at me. And that was it. He stayed there. And pretty soon he kind of starts to ignore me. And so Jerry says, okay, make him move, make him move. And I started to learn the basic lesson that the dominant horse is the one that makes the other one move. And no two horses in the herd are in the same place. There's a pecking order. But the language of horses is the language of motion. And that's why I'm bringing this up. There's something really interesting about this verse, but I want to throw you a puzzle that I was confronted with early on with Jerry, and I didn't understand it in the beginning. In fact, it goes back to the very first day when Jerry did the demonstration. He started to show me what he was doing. He would pick up the rope a little bit, or pick up his hand, and maybe he'd like swing the tail of the rope a little bit, and that horse would start moving. But then he also demonstrated to me how the horse trusted him. And you know how he demonstrated that? By twirling the rope, and the horse stood still. And I didn't understand. How does the horse know if he's supposed to move or stand still? To my observation, he's twirling the rope. Sometimes the horse would go when he wanted him to go, and when he wanted the horse to stand still and he's twirling the rope, the horse would stand still. And that was a puzzle to me. How does he know? I'm going to come back to that. There's a very interesting dichotomy in this chapter. And that is that we have all this talk about motion and being still, and God's command to be still. But what does it say next? Be still and no. And we're going to be introduced to a very interesting dichotomy here. What does it mean to know? We use know in a lot of different ways, right? But if we want to understand what the Bible means by the word know, K-N-O-W, we're asking the question, what does God mean when He says no? Be still and know. Obviously, Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Adam knew Eve. Now, we don't use the word know that way now. We all know what it means. And no, I'm not going to go kind of weird on you today, like trying to make this some kind of a sensual thing. The point is this, that if we just start to look at how God uses the word know, there are two things that are connected. It's something intimate and it's an experience. It's an experience because we tend, and I don't know if this is just a thing of like Western thought or what it is, but we tend to think of knowing as very factual. Like if I know something, I could spit it out to you, or I could, recite it to you. If I know a poem, or if I know my math facts, right, I could recite them. And so we tend to think of knowing as something very factual. But in the Bible, knowing is very experiential. It involves going through an experience. And so when God says, He uses the word know, in fact, here's a great example. In Genesis chapter 22, you remember the story. We don't need to turn there. The story of Abraham sacrificing or offering up Isaac on the altar. Remember the story? When God finally comes through at the last moment, I mean, you picture Abraham lifting the gleaming blade in his hand, and literally, now I believe this, and I believe this because in Hebrews it says that he received his son back from the dead in a figure. So what that means to me is he had made the decision to lower his hand. It's going down. And at that moment, God interrupts, and what does He say? After stop, what does He say? Now I know. You see that? Now, see, here's the question. If knowing was just factual, then how could God say, now I know? Because you can't wiggle around this. To say now I know means that He didn't know before. Now don't check me out here yet, okay? Just hang with me on this. I'm not suggesting God doesn't know everything. But you see, here's the dilemma with the Word. God knows all the facts. He knows everything. He knows what's going to happen. How is it possible that God doesn't know something? Because if we're talking about an experience, there are there is an experience with God, between God and you, that hasn't happened yet. Are you with me? And until that happens, he can't say, now I know, because it hasn't happened yet in the sense of an experience. Are we together? And so that's why he could say, now I know. He was essentially saying to Abraham, we just experienced something that you and I never experienced before together. Now, when you know the history of this, it's really powerful, because do you realize Abraham had been praying and asking God to help him understand the plan of salvation because he was not clear on it. He was struggling to understand the plan of redemption. When you understand it from that perspective, it's amazing. Because how does God decide to teach him? With a PowerPoint or a whiteboard? Nothing wrong with whiteboards or PowerPoint, but that's not how he decided to teach him. He answered his prayer in an amazing way. He said, take thy son, thine only son Isaac, and go to a place that I will show you, and offer him up for a sacrifice. What he was saying is, okay, we're going on a trip. You and I are going to go through an experience together. A scary experience, right? And because knowing, in this sense, be still and know, requires experience, then God could say, now I know. Now I know. I remember the day that I showed up for the horse training and Jerry said, we're going to do something different today. And I said, okay, well, we do something different every day. But anyway, he said, we brought Scout into the round pen, and I could, as soon as, he had this big, like 60-foot round pen with walls on it. And as soon as he opened the gate, Scout was nervous. He was like a wreck. His head was up, his ears were up. And I was like, what's going on? And he said, Dave, he said, all the way across the round pen over there, I laid a 4x4 piece of this queen tarp on the ground. This horse sees it on the ground all the way across, and it's new. And so, of course, what does it mean? It's going to kill me. You know, that thing is there to kill me. So Jerry said, today we're going to teach Scout to walk over that tarp. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how hard could that be? Walk over a tarp? Well, I found out how hard that can be. And it was an amazing experience. I know, Larry, you've seen this. Anybody else, have you ever seen like a 1,000-pound animal tremble? I mean, it's powerful. And when you're standing right there, and Jerry's warning me, careful, Dave, careful, you know, he could bolt, run over you. I was almost trembling. By the end of the day, we had Scout. He'd walk forward over the tarp, backward over the tarp. A couple days later, Laura's mom came up to visit. And we were going to go to Spokane. And so we're going right by Jerry's place. And I said, hey, Luann, I said, you want to meet Scout? The horse's name. They named him Sprout, but isn't that a dumb name for a horse? I mean, so I changed it to Scout. Anyway, you want to meet Scout? And she said, yeah. So we pulled in. Now, mind you, this is just a couple days. The last time Scout and I had together was the tarp day. Whole day. That's all, well, whole day. 2 or 3 hours. That's what we spent doing. So we stop. We walk up. And today, something was different. Scout came out, and I noticed something. He just came right up to me, and I thought, well, that's a little different. And I started to walk away, and he just followed me. He just followed me everywhere. Everywhere I went, he just followed me. And it was almost like, yeah, I remember that tarp thing, like, I can trust you. But as long as I stick with you, the tarp's not going to kill me. It's going to be okay. Now I know. Are you starting to catch the idea? Be still and know. Now here's the interesting thing. Knowing. Knowing, we've already said, involves experience. In fact, knowing is very much equated with doing in the Bible. And we're actually getting now to the heart of, I think, an end-time theological point that's extremely important, and that is really controverted in Christianity. It's certainly controverted in Adventism. And that is, how important is action? How important is obedience? What part does it play? What part do efforts play in the whole scheme of things, in the plan of redemption? And so I don't have to be late. You were aware that this is quite a controversial topic. Because there are many people, of course, that say that there's nothing at all that we can do. I think everybody here is probably into country living. We're at Countryside Church after all, right? So, if country living has done anything for me, it's helped me to understand the importance of works in the Christian life. And I just say that without apology. I told a friend of mine who's a pastor that recently, who was really down on good works, and I said, sorry, but what I've learned is, by the sweat of thy brow, it's a lot of hard work. Now, some people flinch, but I think we shouldn't be afraid to say it. My perspective is this: how much does it take? Everything you got. All of it. And at times, it feels like it's requiring even more than what you got. And you got to push. It really is true, by the sweat of thy brow. The problem is this, that some people have a hard time understanding that all that I have is in actuality immeasurably small. Because it feels like it's huge. The reality is that when I'm exerting everything that I have, it's immeasurably small. There's a great quote I love. I didn't write down the reference, but you can find it. The part man has to play is immeasurably small, but it is just that part that is needed to make the work a success. It's needed. And other places she says that it requires all that we have. So all that we have is immeasurably small. But it never feels that way to us because we're finite. We are small. And that immeasurably small feels huge. But here's the problem. I'm convinced that we can't properly appreciate the power of the gospel unless we give it all we have. And the reason is because you really can't appreciate when divinity kicks in unless you've exhausted humanity. So you have to give all, or you're never going to appreciate what divinity is bringing to the table. Now, by the way, that's why, in Matthew 7, 22, 23, Jesus identifies His people as those who obey Him, who take action. And here's the dichotomy. It's like, wait a minute. If knowing involves experience, and experience involves action, I would say that the experience that Abraham went through with God was very active. Wouldn't you say that? That was extremely active in a lot of ways. They climbed a mountain. There's just action painted all over that thing. Went on a big trip. This was not a sit back on your laurels experience. And it was emotionally taxing, doesn't even come close. It must have been emotionally just totally exhausting. Imagine that trip all the way up the mountain. You know what you're headed toward. This is your son. He knows it the whole time. Exhausting. Here's the dichotomy. Be still and know. Be still and act. Be still and move. Wait a minute. If knowing involves action, and this is all captured in the same phrase where God says to be still, how do we put this together? What does this really mean? Now, I want to go back to the little puzzle that I shared with you. Remember I told you that with Scout, or with his own horse, Jerry, and I learned it with Scout then how it worked, but with his own horse, like he'd twirl the rope and the horse would go, and he'd twirl the rope and the horse would stand still. Like, what? And Jerry taught me that what made the difference is the cue. It's the cue. And the cue is very subtle. I mean, you know, I guess if the horse trainer's done his job, right, the cue can be very subtle. And so I learned that even the way Jerry stood made a difference. You know, if he wanted the horse to go, there was just a little bit more, almost like a leaning in his stance. And you know, he would just like go like that maybe with his finger. You can't even see it now. You just go like that maybe, have the rope. But if he wanted the horse to stand still and trust him while he twirled the rope, you know, he'd just kind of stand back like this. And he could twirl that rope, and there's no cue to go. And so the message was, I'm not telling you to go, but I am going to twirl this rope and I want you to trust me. And he could twirl that rope and make that rope just almost whistle in the air. Over his head, side to side. Horse would just stand there. It's all about the cue. So what is God asking us to do? I want to propose to you that He's asking us to start taking cues. So be still is not about not being active. It's about not being active on your own path. It's about not going your own way. In effect, God is saying, stop, come with me. Let's go together. You know, it's a partnership. That was one thing I'll tell you, when I've had some opportunities to watch Larry interacting with our horses. I think it's fair for me to say that what I see is a partnership, not a domination. Is that a good way to describe it? It's a partnership. Now I remember somebody saying, well, it's a 51% partnership. You're the leader. You're the leader. But it's not a domination. It's not a forcing you under my thumb kind of experience. It's together. You know, Laura and I have both thought we should have had horses before we had a child. There's a lot of great lessons. Probably the most painfully true lesson is about consistency. Because it's been amazing to me how one inconsistency can set you back with a horse. And you were going to go out and go for a ride, but you were inconsistent, and now you got to deal with a problem because you were inconsistent. And Laura and I both thought, boy, we wish we understood that better before we went to training humans. But there's something else too that I hope I started to learn it, working with Scout, was that basically, and there must be some bad horses out there too, I think Scout's a pretty good horse, but basically the horse wants to please you. And every step in the right direction is a good step. It's not a sign of rebellion. But I started to learn something that I have to tell you. And I can tend to be maybe I won't go there. I'll just say that this could be challenging for me before I started working with horses. I started to learn that if I, for instance, trying to teach Scout to respond to the lead when I'm riding him and I want him to turn or whatever, I could pull on the rein. And he's turning, but he's not turning enough. He's not turning the way I wanted him. He's not turning as far as I wanted him to turn. And I'm going to pull harder and try to get him to turn. No, that was good, but I want more. And I discovered that doing that would cause us to go backward. We would lose ground. Instead of, I give him a signal, and rather than rebelling, he cooperates. And no, I'm looking at, from the trainer's perspective, I'm looking and saying, yeah, I wish that looked better, but you know what? That was good. That was good. And I discovered that if I approached it from that perspective, that we make a lot more progress in a day, rather than, well, yeah, you turned that far, but I wanted you to turn this far. And perhaps there's another lesson there about working with people. But for one thing is for sure, I feel like it gave me an insight about how God deals with us. You know, I think we're all together on this. Everybody here believe in victory over sin? I do. I mean, you believe it's a good thing? Oh, let's ramp it up. Do you believe it is necessary? Is it a requirement to have this experience before Jesus comes? I believe it wholeheartedly. My experience with working with horses taught me, gave me, I think, a little insight on that whole thing, though. You know, imagine how God sees us. When we're not in a rebellious state, when we're in a state that says, I want to cooperate with you, Lord, and He's looking down, and it probably looks a little ugly, right? Now, granted, His power comes in and activates us, but never forget, sanctification is the work of. There's improvement, there's learning, there's growing. And remember, Jesus talked about first the blade, then the ear, right? So it is a progressive thing. And in the early stages, you know, you could look at that blade, to change analogies, you could look at the blade in the ground and say, no, I wanted corn now. It's not going to do any good, is it? You know, you can pull it up. You know, next time you see it sprout, you better give me grain. It's not going to happen. So, in this whole co-partnership with this horse, I started to get a sense of what I think God has in mind in a co-partnership with us. And I'm starting with this today because I think that rather than save the most important thing till last today, in my opinion, I decided to start with the most important thing because I really believe that what we desperately need right now, more than a keener understanding of prophecy, more than a keener understanding of current events and where we are on the stream of time, is we are in desperate need of an experience that's a co-partnership with the trainer, God. That's going to get us through. I mean, I think probably everybody here recognizes we haven't seen prophecy being fulfilled like this in our lifetime, right? I mean, we are there. The question is, are we in a co-partnership? When the Lord lifts on that rein, am I in a state of rebellion? Or am I saying, coming with you, Lord? Yep, I'm coming. Oh yeah, let's go. I'm with you. You really, the Lord, just like Jerry's eyes lit up when he said, look, he's paying attention to me now. I can't but help but think that God's eyes light up. He says, look at his ear. Look at his nose. Look at, he's coming with me now. This is good. I want to suggest to you that the command to be still and know is to stop going it alone. Don't stop going. Just stop going it alone and start going with God. We need that co-partnership. The question is, are you still today? Is there chaos around you? Oh yeah. I mean, there's different degrees of it, and there's different degrees of proximity, how close it might be to you, even in your personal life, I don't know. But we're in a world of incredible chaos. Do you need to stop some movement in your life and start moving with God today? It's time. It's time. See, the secret for stillness is not inactivity. It's movement, but it's following the cue and moving with the trainer. Let's pray. In fact, let's kneel together as we pray. Dear Heavenly Father, here we are. The envy of Christians of the past who longed to see this day in their own day, and they've passed off the scene, they're waiting in the graves. But we have the privilege of being alive to see these things unfolding. Somehow deep in my heart, I feel that there's a need for deeper preparation. That we need to be in co-partnership with you on a much deeper level. And you're inviting us today to be still and know. Not to stop action altogether, but to start moving with you. And Lord, I just pray that you'd send your Holy Spirit right now to enlighten our minds, each one of us here, because I believe that there are different issues represented by every different person here, something unique to us that we need to say, yes, Lord, I'm going to move with you on that. And that's where it starts. Real close to home, right where we are. I thank you so much for being the patient trainer, the patient Heavenly Father that you are. That you haven't cast us out. That you're patiently working with us. And Lord, I believe that everyone here, in their heart, is turning to you and they're saying, Lord, I do want to serve you and I want to follow you and I want to move with you. And I want to have that co-partnership. So Lord, I pray that you would be with each one. Not only enlighten our minds as to, yep, that's the thing right there. I've got to be willing to let that go, or I need to be willing to make that move, whatever it is. It's personal. An experience that you want to have with us right now. And I pray that you would also instill in our hearts the picture, the reality of where that's going to take us. To a place that we look to the future not with fear, but with great anticipation, because we're going with you. Lord, I think about the people around us that we know that desperately need to have a deeper understanding of the truth. How can we convey that to them with power unless we're in a co-partnership with you? Unless our hearts are right in tune and we're traveling with you. Lord, I pray that we'd have that experience. That we would be still and know that you are God. I believe every person in this room even is probably here because at one point in life they felt like, you know what, I got to move. I've got to get my family out. I've got to get closer to the Lord. But all kinds of things happen. It gets busy, even in the country. There's problems and challenges and burdens. And the enemy's always looking for a way to steal the experience from us that you've called us into. And I pray that there could be a renewal in our hearts back to that experience. That first and foremost, like Enoch, we're about walking with you. We're about having that deep connection with you. So we don't have that. Even if we recognize the times, even if we have factual knowledge of the truth, which is important, we'll fall short without a deep experience with you. So I pray for that, for each of us today. Thank you in advance for the answer to that prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.